April 9, 1942. The tip of the Bataan Peninsula, Philippines. The air is a thick, stagnant soup of cowardice, rotting vegetation, and the copper tang of blood. Major General Edward P. King looks at the men surrounding him, hollow-eyed skeletons in tattered khaki, their skin yellowed by jaundice and malaria. For 93 days, they have held the line on half rations, then quarter rations, then nothing but mule meat and hope. Now, even the hope has run dry. The sound of the Japanese 150mm howitzers has finally ceased, replaced by a silence so heavy it rings in the ears. King turns to his aide, his voice a dry rasp. He knows he is making history, but not the kind any commander dreams of. He is about to surrender the largest force in American history. "I'm going to go see the Japanese commander," King says, his shoulders slumped under the weight of 76,000 lives. "We can't hold. If I don't do this, they'll be slaughtered where they lie." Across the ravines of Mount Samat, Sergeant Elias Ramos of the Philippine Scouts clutches his M1 Garand. His stomach is a knotted void. He hasn't had a full meal since January. Beside him, Corporal Miller, a kid from Ohio who used to joke about the battling bastards of Bataan, is shaking, not from fear, but from the rigors of the shakes, the malaria that has claimed more men than Japanese snipers ever could. The word trickles down the line like poison. Surrender. White flags, fashioned from grimy undershirts and flour sacks, begin to rise above the foxholes. The American and Filipino soldiers emerge from the jungle like ghosts rising from the earth, and they expect the Bushido honor they've heard of, a soldier's respect for a fallen foe. Instead, they meet the eyes of the Imperial Japanese Army, and they see only contempt. To the Japanese soldier, surrender is the ultimate cowardice. The sun begins to climb, a relentless white orb that promises to bake the peninsula. The Japanese guards begin to bark orders, the sharp, staccato sounds of a language the prisoners don't understand, punctuated by the rhythmic thwack of bamboo cleaned into backs and the metallic clack of bayonets being fixed. "Move!" a guard screams, shoving Miller with the butt of a Type 38 rifle. The column begins to form, a serpentine mass of humanity stretching miles back into the green hell of the jungle. They are told they are marching to a camp. They are told there will be water. They are told they will be treated as prisoners of war. As the first boots strike the dusty pavement of the East Road, heading north toward San Fernando, the realization begins to sink in. This is not a march to a camp. It is a march into a void where the rules of civilization have been discarded in the dirt. April 11th, 1942. The road near Orani. The tropical sun is no longer a celestial body. It is a physical weight, a white-hot hammer beating against the skulls of the men. By 10 a.m., the temperature has soared past 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The humidity clings to the skin like a wet wool blanket, suffocating and heavy. "Don't look at them," Sergeant Ramos whispers to Miller, his eyes fixed on the heels of the man in front of him. "Keep your head down and just keep your feet moving." The Japanese guards, fresh and well-fed, ride past on bicycles or in trucks, their canteens sloshing with water, a sound that haunts the prisoners more than the screams. They are practicing what the POWs will come to call the sun treatment. The columns are forced to halt in open fields, stripped of their hats or any makeshift shade, and made to sit in the dirt for hours. Anyone who wavers or tries to crawl toward the shade of a nearby mango tree is met with a point from a Nambu pistol or the swift arc of a katana. The thirst is a living thing. It claws at the throat and turns tongues into thick pieces of dry leather. Along the side of the road, artesian wells bubble with cool, clear water. A cruel irony designed by the geography of the peninsula. Whenever a prisoner, driven mad by dehydration, breaks ranks to dash for a sip, the crack of a rifle echoes through the humid air. Corporal Miller watches as a young Filipino soldier, no older than 18, collapses just yards from a puddle of muddy water. Before Miller can reach out, a Japanese guard lunges forward. There is no warning. The bayonet enters the boy's back with a sickening, wet slide. The guard pulls the blade out, and wipes it on the boy's tunic and gestures for the column to continue. "Keep moving," the guard bellows in broken English. "Speedo! Speedo!" The road is becoming a graveyard. Every few hundred yards, a body lies crumpled in the dust. Some are missing heads. Others have been flattened by the wheels of Japanese trucks that refuse to swerve. The smell of decay begins to compete with the salt of sweat. The prisoners learn the Bataan shuffle, a rhythmic, agonizing drag of the feet that conserves the last sparks of energy. They strip their pockets of anything that might be considered Japanese loot. Yen notes, pictures of girls with dark hair, or even Japanese-made watches. Possession of such items is an immediate death sentence, viewed as battlefield theft by the captors. By dusk, the column reaches a clearing where they are herded like cattle into a barbed wire enclosure. There is no food. There is no medicine for the dysentery that is now liquefying the insides of the men, forcing them to soil themselves where they stand. The shame is secondary now. Survival is the only currency left. "Ramos," Miller croaks, his voice barely a tremor in the dark. "I don't think I can do another 10 miles. Ramos reaches out, his hand finding Miller's bony shoulder. "You don't do 10 miles, kid. You just do the next step, then the one after that." April 14th, 1942. The outskirts of Lubao. The column has become a grotesque, slow-moving river of misery. The Bataan shuffle has slowed to a crawl as the men enter the central plains of Luzon. The lush jungle of the peninsula has given way to open rice paddies, where the heat radiates off the stagnant water in shimmering, sickening waves. For Corporal Miller, the world has narrowed to the scorched neck of the man in front of him. His boots have disintegrated, his feet now wrapped in blood-soaked rags that have hardened into a stiff crust. Every step feels like walking on broken glass. But the sound of the cleanup squads behind them keeps his heart drumming against his ribs. These are the Japanese details assigned to dispose of the stragglers, those too weak to maintain the pace. The rhythmic pop-pop of pistol shots and the dull thud of bayonets hitting bone serve as a grim metronome for the march. "Look," Ramos whispers, gesturing with a trembling chin toward the edge of the road. A group of Filipino civilians, mostly women and children, are huddled near a bamboo thicket. Risking their lives, they attempt to toss small balls of rice wrapped in banana leaves or bizcocho crackers into the ranks. A young girl tries to hand a canteen to a stumbling American sergeant. A Japanese guard rushes forward, swinging his rifle butt with a sickening crack against the girl's jaw. She collapses, and the rice is ground into the dirt under the guard's boot. "No help!" the guard screams at the prisoners. "No mercy for cowards." The cruelty has become systematic. The Japanese, most frustrated by the unexpected 3-month delay the Bataan defenders had caused their Great East Asia timetable, take their resentment out on the captives. They force the prisoners to stand at attention for hours under the noon sun, then suddenly order a double-time march for miles. By the time they reach Lubao, the dysentery has reached epidemic proportions. The stench of the column is unbearable, a mix of unwashed bodies, gangrenous wounds, and the sweet, cloying odor of death. Men are losing control of their bowels every few minutes, their strength draining away into the dust. Miller watches an officer he once respected, a colonel, crawl into a ditch to relieve himself. He never gets back up. A guard simply steps over the side and thrusts a bayonet into the officer's throat before returning to the road, unbothered. He was a good man, Miller mumbles, his mind beginning to wander into the haze of heat stroke. Don't look back, Ramos commands, his voice a ghost of its former authority. If you look back, you lose the will. Look at my heels, Miller. Just my heels. The night brings no relief. They are packed into bullpens, cramped, filthy enclosures where they are forced to sleep standing up or sitting in their own waste. There is no water to wash the filth away. The air is thick with mosquitoes, carrying the next wave of malaria that will finish what the sun and the bayonet started. As the moon rises over the silhouettes of the palm trees, the only sound is the low, communal moan of thousands of men in agony. A sound that Miller realizes is the collective heartbeat of a dying army. April 17th, 1942, San Fernando Railhead. The marchers finally stumble into the town of San Fernando. For many, the 100-kilometer trek on foot is over, but the reprieve is a cruel illusion. The Japanese guards begin herding the prisoners toward the railway station, where a line of boxcars, small, steel-sided freight cars designed for sugarcane or cattle, awaits under the blistering midday sun. "Get in! Get in!" the guards shriek, using their rifle butts to jam men into the confined spaces. Miller and Ramos are shoved into a car, barely large enough for 40 men. The guards continue to pack them in. 60, 80, nearly 100 men squeezed into a space where they cannot even turn around. The sliding steel doors are slammed shut and locked from the outside. Instantly, the temperature inside the metal box begins to climb. There is no ventilation, save for a few small cracks in the floorboards. The air is quickly used up, replaced by the suffocating heat of a furnace and the overwhelming stench of unwashed skin and rotting wounds. I can't breathe," a voice gasps from the darkness of the corner. Men begin to faint while standing up, their bodies held upright only by the sheer density of the crowd. Sweat pours off them in rivers, soaking their tattered uniforms until the floor of the boxcar is slick with a mixture of perspiration and excrement. The metal walls become too hot to touch. Miller feels his lungs burning. Every breath is a struggle for oxygen that isn't there. Beside him, Ramos is rigid, his eyes closed, praying in a low, rhythmic Spanish. "Hang on, Miller," Ramos whispers, though his own breath is coming in short, ragged hitches. "The train will move. The movement will bring air." When the train finally jolts forward, the lurching motion causes several men to collapse. Those who fall to the floor are stepped on. In the pitch-black chaos, there is no way to avoid crushing them. The death march has moved from the dusty roads to these rolling ovens. By the time the train reaches Capas, hours later, the doors are unsealed. As the sunlight hits the interior, the horror is revealed. Several men do not move. They remain standing, propped up by their comrades, dead from suffocation or heat exhaustion. When the survivors stumble out onto the platform, the bodies of the fallen are simply tumbled out of the cars like refuse. The prisoners are then marched the final few miles to Camp O'Donnell, a former Philippine Army training center. But as the gate swings open, they realize the safety of the camp is merely a slower version of the road. The barbed wire doesn't keep the death out, it locks it in. Over the next few months, thousands more will perish in the big ward of the camp. where the medicine is non-existent and the burial details work from dawn until dusk. The Bataan death march has technically ended. But for the survivors, the tragedy has only entered a new, more stagnant phase of suffering. The blood-soaked road eventually led to the gates of Camp O'Donnell. But it was not a release. Here, hundreds more souls succumbed each day to exhaustion and disease. In 1946, General Hama Masaharu faced the gallows for these crimes. But justice could not resurrect those who lay buried beneath the dust of Luzon. Bataan was more than just a military defeat. It was an eternal scar on the hearts of a generation, a costly reminder of the limits of endurance and the price of self-respect.